Disney dropped the trailer for their upcoming Disney Plus series, Star Wars Skeleton Crew, and I just thought I'd share my thoughts on it.
'Cause I've been living life right like I could just die any minute. Going for a ride down the side.
Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Berry. Welcome to the StudioJake vidcast where I talk about all things pop culture. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and if you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast and consider becoming a channel member. Alright, so Disney and Lucasfilm dropped the trailer to Star Wars Skeleton Crew, a sort of coming of age story, or at least that's how it's being billed, set in the Star Wars universe, particularly at the same time frame as The Mandalorian. And watching this trailer, I have to admit, there was really nothing wrong with the trailer. You can definitely tell that the creators of the show, John Watts and Christopher Ford, and of course, John Watts is the director of the Spider-Man films for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that this is geared toward a younger audience. Essentially, you've got four kids, they discover some conspiracy on their home planet, and then they get launched into space on board this mysterious craft. They're trying to get home, and they run into a character played by Jude Law, who agrees to help them fly home. And then it shows like all of their antics that they encounter, or clips of them. It shows their parents back home desiring to find them. And then it has all these retro sort of 60s and 70s labeling. It's got an actual song as opposed to a score attached to the trailer. And like I said, the trailer in and of itself isn't bad. It looks like a kid show set in Star Wars, set in the Disney Plus Star Wars era. Normally, I wouldn't have a problem with this. I would think, hey, this is cool. It's good that younger kids get to experience Star Wars, right? I think that that's really cool. I felt that way about certain episodes of Star Wars Visions, season 1, I should clarify. Disney, like I said, has had a poor track record with Star Wars. We've seen good shows like The Mandalorian, at least season 1 and 2, Andor, and whatnot, but then we've seen really bad shows like Obi-Wan Kenobi, like The Acolyte. I'm not really sure where this will land. And honestly, I feel like Disney has sort of run out of goodwill for me to even consider to sit down and watch the show, even as a reviewer. Because a lot of times I will suffer bad TV shows just because I feel like there needs to be a review of it. To maybe it's being highly praised by critics who like it for some reason, but it's actually terrible. I like to do stuff like that. And it's not just because I'm a masochist. Skeleton Crew, like I said, it could be good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a kids show set in the Star Wars universe. Certainly Star Wars had an element of fun to it. We saw this in both the original series and the prequels. It didn't take itself so seriously at times. It was serious when it needed to be, but then on times when it needed to bring in a little bit of joy, a little bit of fun, it wasn't afraid to do that. So there's nothing wrong with taking, sort of the darker side of the Star Wars universe and turning it into Andor or The Mandalorian, or taking the more fun side and making things like Skeleton Crew. It's just that there is a total lack of trust that I have with Disney right now. Kathleen Kennedy has burned all her bridges when it comes to Star Wars fans. We've had movie announcement after movie announcement after movie announcement after movie announcement, with none of them moving forward. And the ones that do move forward are ones that no one cares about. That goes for TV shows as well. Look at The Acolyte. That was supposed to be Kathleen Kennedy's Pearl because it's set in the time frame that Kathleen Kennedy cares about so much. You have the Old Republic, you have the prequels era, you have the Imperial era, which includes the original trilogy, and then of course you have the Disney era, which is the sequel trilogy, as well as the High Republic. And the High Republic is set in the time after the Old Republic, but before the prequels. And there's nothing wrong with Kathleen Kennedy coming in, taking over, and says, hey, I'm going to focus on this segment of Star Wars history that's largely been unexplored. In fact, I would have encouraged her to do that. That way, the original characters are sort of a few degrees away from it, so if something goes wrong, you can do it. But that's not what Kathleen Kennedy did. She wanted to completely erase George Lucas and his sort of classical, almost modern way of telling stories and put her own postmodern spin on things. So everything had to be touched. The original trilogy had to be touched with the sequel trilogy. The prequels had to be touched with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and now the era in between that happens right after Return of the Jedi, that has to be touched by The Mandalorian season 3 and now the Skeleton Crew, as well as, of course, the Book of Boba Fett. And so you have this sense that every part of Star Wars that you liked had been tainted in some ways. And that's a shame because Star Wars was already for everyone. There was something for everyone to enjoy, but they kept wanting to push identity and woke politics into their stories. And it ended up, instead of being something that was sort of above the fray, this high fantasy series that set in a sort of science fiction narrative, it gets taken away. And you might be asking, Jacob, what does all this have to do with Skeleton Crew? It's not even out yet, and you admit that the trailer is good. So why are you setting up this sort of buffer that you're expecting it to be bad? Because, again, Disney has had a poor track record with Star Wars. Yes, we've gotten some good things. Rogue One, a Star Wars story. We've gotten The Mandalorian Season 1 and 2. We've had Star Wars Vision Season 1. We've had Andor Season 1. But for every good job that they did a bad job. They completely bungled the Bad Batch spinoff. That show was not interesting. No one cared about other projects like Obi-Wan Kenobi, or I mentioned The Acolyte. There's been no excitement for any new movie announcement. Part of the reason of that is every time they announce a new movie, it keeps getting delayed. So we saw this with Ryan Johnson, or as I like to call him, Ruin Johnson, right? The Last Jedi did very well at the box office, but then it was poorly received. But before they realized it was poorly received, it was announced that he would have a trilogy set into the Old Republic. It was rumored that that was the case, but alas, that's never been given any updates. The creators of Game of Thrones, they actually sabotaged the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones so they could jump ship to Star Wars, but because they bungled that finale, they seem to not be getting a Star Wars movie. Kevin Feige has said the one that he was supposed to be producing, it's no longer on the table. I haven't heard any updates on the one that Taika Waititi was supposed to be directing, and you can stay the same on a plethora of other projects. Patty Jenkins and her Rogue Squadron film. All of these movies were announced and never materialized, and there are rumors it's because Kathleen Kennedy keeps sending back notes to scripts, to the screenwriters, to the directors, and no one wants to work with her. And that is her own fault. That is a position that she herself found herself in with just her whole demeanor, her attitude, this hostility toward classic Star Wars fans in favor of chasing an audience that doesn't actually exist. If the so-called modern audience actually existed, if it was out there, then Star Wars would be doing pretty good. Disney wouldn't be begging people to subscribe to Disney Plus or to do those bundles with Hulu, with ESPN. Disney is chasing after audiences that don't exist, or if they do exist, they don't have any money. Because all of these projects, from Star Wars going into Marvel, into Pixar, and just general Walt Disney Studios, they would at least be breaking even at the box office, but they're not even doing that. Solo lost money. Remember, that's a big carrying cry for a lot of people. Solo lost money, and they just have to face the fact that ultimately they're going the wrong direction. They're going to have to do a whole lot to convince fans to come back for stuff like the Skeleton Crew, because even if it's good, we're tired of being gaslit, we're tired of being attacked, and we just want to watch Star Wars. If I were you, if you're a Star Wars fan, find the prequels, find the original series on DVD. If you can find the original cuts to those films, even better. I'm a big promoter of physical media because I don't see these streaming services going anywhere special. Hey, if you liked that video, be sure to give it a like, share it out to all your friends, leave me a comment on what you think, and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member. If you want to support me in a bigger way, click on the link to my locals community. It's in the description of the video. You can become a monthly subscriber, or you can send me tips on the articles I post there, including exclusive ones just for my locals members. You can also purchase one or all of my novels on Amazon.com. They're in my link tree. I've got so many cool things. I've got a supernatural thriller, I've got a high fantasy series, and I've got a fantasy romance. So head on over and check those out and leave me a 5-star review. It really helps out indie creators like myself. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.